category. First one is I will talk about what's happening in Sri Lanka and the world, about the diseases, death, and about vaccination very briefly. Then the core part is more importantly what really happens with the viral infection, the latest update on the basic pathophysiology for you all to understand. Then thirdly, with that I will say what the treatment options are available at the moment. There are few treatment, at least 3 treatment options are available recommended by WHO and Sri Lanka, and there are controversial treatment also we'll discuss. Then lastly, I will, as there are few of you are here, the background of Eastern medicinal system like Ayurveda and Siddha doctors also probably here. So I think it's more relevant to them. I'll talk about some aspect which we never talk, which most of the time we don't talk, and about the immunity and how to improve the immunity, some other aspects of fighting the COVID. So let me start with the present status globally and in Sri Lanka. I think I can off my video. Okay, right. Now, if you see, as per I think today or yesterday, now globally 178 million cases and nearly more than 3 or 4 million deaths. That's alarming. And in Sri Lanka, more than 2 lakhs cases with more than nearly 2,500 deaths. If you see the Sri Lankan situation compared to UK, India, United States, if you see, we are on the almost near the top here. Sri Lanka, this is growing up. And I feel for the last few days, there is some hope that the cases are coming down, but very difficult to predict now. If you see United Kingdom, that also, I think, yeah, Sri Lanka is green. Green actually coming down a little bit recently, but the UK again goes up. These are alarming due to Delta wave. These are due to Delta. So again, another problem is, I think, waiting for another problem in United Kingdom. Sri Lanka is coming down. So this is the present situation. And if you see the death rate, this is for the comparison I put. I gave a lecture. There was a lecture June 6th, and compared to the present situation, if you see Brazil, the death rate is 2.8, nearly 3%. Globally, more than 2%. If you see states, 1.79, India 1.29, and Sri Lanka 1.04. But it was once upon a time, it was 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, and few days ago 0.91. It is now increasing significantly, death rate. Why? Not because the virus is very virulent or it's spreading. It is spreading fast, of course. It's not because of the virus. Now the human resources are saturated and the facilities are saturated. That's the problem. So now it has bypassed 1% that mark. But still we are much better than UK, USA, and even globally. The prediction, I think this is based on the USA, some university work. So as per this, the peak will be somewhere in the future. But if you see the present statistics, I think it looks like as if the cases are coming down. So that's some hope. But the prediction is by the peak, you'll have the death is nearly about 144. Now our maximum death recently about 100. Now it is around 50. So it's good we are coming down, but it's very difficult to say now. So this is the prediction. Worst scenario can go up, but with all this mask and other lockdown, the cases may come down. By September, we are in the bottom. I think we will be somewhat safe, but very difficult to predict these days with the Delta waves and Delta viruses and other new variants. If you look at the vaccination, we have already vaccinated more than 2 million people. Compared to other country, here we are. I think Israel is one of the good example. They have nearly vaccinated 63%. UK 61, Chile, another country again 61, United States 52, Sri Lanka 12. I think now it's nearly 12%. India 14. We are in the bottom, but very soon it will go up. I mean, we can vaccinate many people. This is the status of vaccination. After vaccination, what happens? If you see US, it comes down. If you see Israel, yes, this is the beginning of the vaccination. Then after about 7 days, I think it started to coming down and it comes down, right? But in Chile, it was actually after vaccination, the cases went up. Don't know the reason. Maybe I think they use the Chinese vaccine. Wow. So this is the situation. So in Sri Lanka, it's only 10-12%, very difficult to tell what's going to happen, but with time, hopefully it will come down. Surprisingly, I got another statistics. If you see a significant, nearly 1/5 of the population, even Canada, United Kingdom, 12% states, they are unvaccinated, not willing to get vaccinated. That group is still there in everywhere. So it's United States, 12%. United Kingdom 12, other countries almost 20%, Denmark, Canada, German. So Sri Lanka, we don't have this figure. So nearly 1/5 or 1/6 of the population are not willing to get vaccinated. I'm not telling who is right and wrong. It is because future we can't predict anything. Anyway, just for the sake of completeness, I have added one of my teachers, Professor Suranjit Sanivaratna's slide. He is my teacher. So just to compare a few other vaccines, at least if we can concentrate here, Pfizer and the Moderna is in the top in most of the, if you see all the most positive side. But if, for example, Sinopharm, the efficacy is nearly 78 to 86%. Sinovac 51 to 84%. Just for the comparison, I just added this slide. If you see the variant, of course, mainly the Delta wave, if you see the Indian variant, they are not that efficient against, the vaccine are not very efficient against this particular virus. If the first dose, only 33 get protected, and after second dose, it goes up. With the AstraZeneca, 32%, with second dose, 59%. So not very good, but not too bad also. So now I'll come to the main part of, I think, most important part of the talk. That is what really happens. If you see, this is very important to understand for us to, because by understanding this, you can plan the monitoring part, you can plan the treatment, you can save. It's not like I initially thought, okay, whatever you do, nothing can be done. Some of them going to die. It's not so now. Actually, after some understanding of pathophysiology, now we can plan, we can prevent some of the death. That's why it's very important to understand the pathophysiology of the disease. Basically, we can divide these into two categories. One, actually, due to virus itself. Remember, the main problem is not virus itself. The major problem is due to the inflammation the body we create. Over-inflammation, it's not, I don't call it immunity, the balance, the immunity, the balance is imbalance in the immunity, the regulation. So the first part is due to virus, the second part is due to the inflammation, the host response. So remember, as I said, the viral itself does not damage that much as we think. It's just like a flu. But the host response is the one which kills the body. So first is early infection, that is mainly virus. Then virals will go away in the pulmonary phase. Then the last phase, it's about after 14 days and so, you get this hyperinflammation phase. Let's look. So first the virus enters inside the nose, mouth, and the lower respiratory tract. And first it has to bind with the receptor. This is what we call ACE2 receptor. It's very, very important when it comes to patho. ACE2 receptors. It should be there for it to bind. So if you see ACE2 receptors, it's there everywhere in the body, lungs, kidney, GIT. That's why some people get diarrhea, brain, endothelium, mainly the vessel, inside the vessel. So the ACE2 receptors are there. So it binds with in the cell, there's ACE2 receptor. The virus first has to bind. Then it goes through many stages. There is, it releases the that viral genome. Then there is what you call RNA replication. The RNA inside the virus will replicate. It uses our body to do this. So it can't survive without our human cells. Human cells are essential for it to survive. So all the replication happens inside the cell. What will do? It take all the advantage and it produce millions of viruses and ultimately destroy the cell. That's the first phase. So it destroy the cell. It take all the advantage and destroy the cells and it spread to other cells. Basically, that's what happens. In the process, there are many things happens. Shortly, there are antibody formation against this spike protein or antibody formation one side. One most important part of this pathogenesis is the cytokine production. The body produce what we call cytokines. Again, I can't actually explain everything, even I can't understand everything, but there are few things I can mention here. So this is very important to understand the treatment. So virus does all this problem, and later macrophage will be activated through T cells, macrophage, neutrophils. Cytokines will be produced. Out of the cytokine, there are few cytokines very important when it comes to treatment and pathogenesis. Interleukin 6 is one of that. Tumor necrosis factors are the family of cytokine which involve in pathogenesis. At least remember interleukin 6 because we will talk about tocilizumab, one drug which acts against interleukin 6. So initially it's like some people say it's shower, cytokine shower means just a simple shower. But later when it keep on going, there's no regulation in the body. So it causes what we call cytokine storm. That is really bad. That's the bad news. Then it damages every part of the body, but particularly lungs, causes acute respiratory distress syndrome, ARDS. It can then lead to secondary bacterial infection, multi-organ failure, and death. So our aim is to prevent or treat this cytokine storm. Most of the time what happens is it stops there. They won't go 80%, nothing will happen. I'll come to that. So many scientists now say, this is again important to understand, they say it's primarily a vascular problem, endotheliitis, or you can call it a clotting problem. When there is an endothelial damage, then you have the clotting cascade, the coagulation pathway is activated and form clotting. These two are very, very important. It's not simple lung problem, it's not simple pneumonia, it's a vascular problem and it's a clotting problem due to hyperimmune state. This is very important to understand. People think it's a problem in the lung. No, it's a problem in the vessels, but mainly the vessels in the lungs are damaged and there you get clots also. This is important to understand the treatment. So it's primarily a vascular problem or clotting problem as per the present understanding. So there is thrombus formation, very important. You know clot. When there's a clot, small thrombi and macro thrombi are there. When you have macro thrombi clotting, you get, when it happens in the heart, you get myocardial infarction, brain stroke, deep vein thrombosis, and pulmonary embolism. Many people die of these problems. So it's very important. Here it's a microthrombi. I think microbiologists can see better than me the microthrombi in the lungs. This is the problem, one of the most important problem. This is again the same thing. There are few things I can emphasize. there are few tests we do to understand how significant the inflammation, how significant the hyperinflammation they are by doing D-dimer, ferritin. This can be done in Sri Lanka. I think most of you know D-dimer, ferritin, LDH can be done. Interleukin-6, of course, no, but I don't know if some of the labs we can do. CRP, C-reactive protein. These will tell us how bad is the inflammation. These are the markers. So we do that sometime. Now, again, coming back to the same thing, you should understand the incubation period is nearly 5 days. So this is the time the virus enters the body, but 5 days, nothing will happen. But this is the most important period also as well. Why? Because this is the period most of us give infection to others. That is the bad news. That is why we are not able to control the infection. This is the period. Nearly 50%, nearly 47% of the infection happens when the patient is asymptomatic. That's very, very important. Now, next few days, 80% of the people have some myalgia, fever, cough, rarely diarrhea, and settles. That is the fate of 80% of the people. 80%. So nothing will happen. They recover. But there are only few, 15 to 20%. Again, new fever comes, or the fever worsens, deep cough, shortness of breath, all will start come here. That is, they are entering into the inflammatory state. That's the time we have to catch and do something. I'll tell what we can do. So it's very important to catch these people on time. Then later, some people got into, they need intubation, and some of them can recover. Few. So as per the moment, out of 100, only 1 may die. That's the situation. This is the place you can do something. This is the place you must be carefully monitor whether they are entering into this place. If you detect early, if you can intervene, you can prevent death. You can prevent death. And now they are talking about what we call long-term side effect of COVID. Even after 3 months, 6 months, people have symptoms. So that is also we can ignore. Fatigue can persist for 3 months. Dyspnea can persist for 2 months. So significant number of people cough. Loss of smell and taste can persist. There are some neurological problem can persist up to 2 months. So these are another thing we are going to face in near future. Now coming to the treatment, actually at the moment, there are only, I will say 3 treatments. 3 treatments. What are they? 3 treatment, either, okay, now either you have to kill the virus, antiviral, so far nothing worked, but something like ivermectin as a hope, and there are some controversy, we'll talk on that. So at the moment, in Sri Lanka, no antiviral is recommended. So now we are concentrating on this part. So how do you stop the inflammation? Give steroid. It is proven. Steroid can reduce death. Prednisolone, but now we are giving dexamethasone IV for 2 weeks to prevent death. On time, if you start here steroid, and you may increase the deaths by increase the viral replication. We should not give steroid here. We can give steroid, we should give steroid here. Second thing, as I mentioned, here they have, so I said this part, clot. You give anticoagulation. Heparin should be given somewhere here. When the hypoxia comes, we can give heparin for 3 weeks and oxygen. So oxygen also very, very important from the beginning. We know giving right oxygen, right method can prevent death. So there are 3 treatment options at the moment: oxygen, heparin, and steroid. There are many controversial treatment. We'll come to that. So this is a proven, well-proven. WHO also recommending the dexamethasone without any doubt. And blood thinner, that is heparin, also without doubt, it's a proven treatment option. So as I said, it's very important to understand, to start steroid on time, not during the viral replication. If you do so, you may increase the death rate by increasing the viral replication. Secondary, as you know, secondary bacterial infection is common with steroid. You know, this black fungus, this mucormycosis infection in India, it's partly, importantly, due to steroid. And as you know, it can cause new diabetes and hypertension, which is very common. Increasing glucose, very common. These people are very anxious. There is a fear of these things. So with the fear, with the stress, glucose goes up. When you start steroid, it goes up further. It's very common with the patient we have at the moment. Now about ivermectin, it's also important to understand it's not simple thing. I mean, there are many treatment evidence is there. I don't know why WHO and many other important bodies are not recognizing. When it comes to tocilizumab, which each dose is about 1 lakh, more than 1 lakh, they're recommending for some cases, some rare cases. But it's peripathetic. It reduces the death by 4%. But ivermectin, they have done studies. I will show. Here is, I think, this particular study, they have went through 18 randomized control trials. This is a gold standard way of the research. 18 randomized control trials. After that, they have found the ivermectin reduced 75 reduction of death with ivermectin. So I don't know why. It's only very cheaper drug. I think maybe 20-30 rupees. Very cheaper drug. I'm sure in the future the Sri Lankan government will recommend, and many, I think this, I got this slide from this particular YouTube video. Very nice, very interesting interview between this lady, Dr. Tess Lowry. He is a very pioneer in the ivermectin study, and she has done a systematic review. In that, she says it reduced 68% reduction in death. To my knowledge, the recommended tocilizumab, which is very, very expensive, 1 lakh, it reduced the death by 4%. I think I'm right. So who is she? She's Dr. Tess Lowry, is a world-class researcher and consultant to the WHO. She's the director of evidence-based medicine consultants in UK. So that kind of, so I don't know why it's not recommended. But things will change with time. It's a cheaper drug, and this is one. This is what she says in I think in a conference. Dr. Tess Lowry. This is what she was telling. This is very important. It's a very important quote by her, and we all should understand this. This is another thing we all should understand. What she says, I will read this. They who design the trials and control the data also control the outcome. It's very, very important. So this system of industry-led trials need to be put to an end. Data from ongoing and future trials of novel COVID treatment must be independently controlled and analyzed. Anything less than total transparency cannot be trusted. So there are many factors influence the recommendation. The pharmaceutical company particularly, and many other things. So probably when it's cheaper, you don't get the recognition. Cheaper drugs may not get the recognition. Right, there are many drugs like this one, particularly I can tell HCQ is anyway out. Vitamin D is another thing. I feel there is some place, melatonin, zinc, and there are many other things. Aspirin, some people use aspirin and clopidogrel. There are many other drugs. The trials are undergoing, and the future, this may change the way we treat. Again, vitamin D, vitamin D is not simply a vitamin for bone and calcium, related to bone and calcium. There are many studies shows it reduces the cancer risk, diabetic risk, and so many other things like autoimmune disease. So here also they have done few studies. It shows that whenever there is when the vitamin D is higher, the risk of getting COVID is lower. And also treatment with vitamin D here it reduces the hospitalization and mortality. Vitamin D insufficient increase hospitalization and mortality. And similarly, when you give, it reduces the ICU admission and mortality. Right. Going back, I have to mention few other things about the spread of the infection. Now, one thing is very, very important, as I mentioned, asymptomatic people or pre-symptomatic people can spread, and they are the main source of the infection. 47 of the infection are from the pre-symptomatic, before the symptom develop. That's very important to understand. That's why it's very difficult to control. Unlike SARS and MERS, they have severe infection, and the spread is mainly from those who are infected. So easily you can catch them and you can isolate. But here it's very difficult because of this factor. Pre-symptomatic people can spread the infection. Here. So the viral, if you say viral load is when the viral enters the body, with time it goes up. In about 5th day its peak and comes down, and 14th day. That's why we quarantine the people for maximum 14 days. This is the time they spread. This is the time the symptom starts after 4 or 5 days. So it spread 38% from the symptomatic people. 10% from the environment. You touch some environment, maybe hand or phone or door where the virus is present, and you touch your mouth and nose, then you get the infection. It's only minority, 10% of the infection from that kind of a environment. 6%, there are few people who never had infection, never had symptom at all. They are infected but no symptom at all. That is again a minority. Probably their viral load is very minimal. Now, okay, that's all I have to tell. Now, the last part of my talk is a little different. Now look at this one. If you see the mortality by age, young and the older people, it is tenfold increase in the deaths compared to the young people. Tenfold, or sometimes 10 to 15-fold increase in the death rate when it compared to young to the elder people. Similarly, if you compare the people with the disease like diabetes, cardiovascular disease, respiratory disease, and those who are well immune, the death rate may be 14%, and here maybe 1%. So the difference is nearly tenfold. So if you are really healthy, immune, obviously, if you can see, they are the people who can survive. Those who are ill, disease, and elderly, they are the people immunocompromised. Basically, the immunocompromised people are the people vulnerable. Other vulnerable people, their death rate is very high compared to this. So the difference is immunity. I think now we concentrate on prevention. That's great. That's really great, and that's what we should do. Secondly, we think about the treatment, steroid, heparin, oxygen, that and this, but we never, almost never, we never talk about how to improve the immunity. This is a neglected part. I think, I don't know whether I don't know the exact reason. Here, the Eastern medical system will be of great help, not only here, even for the treatment. They are neglected, I'll see. There are here also, I think there are Siddha and Ayurveda doctors may be here. This is the neglected part. I will touch on this. How to improve the immunity, how to improve the healthiness. It's not a joke, actually. We have enough capacity in the body. We have the innate healing power, innate immunity. Actually, when I say hyperimmune, that does not mean the immunity is really good. Actually, the balance is not maintained. For you to have a balance, you should have all these things well. Food, I'll talk about fasting. Mind, because when you are stressful, you are more prone to get disease and the death rate is high. Exercise, sleep, and lastly, the medicine. So I will take one by one. Food. People think it will take long time, no point in talking about this. No, there is a short-term effect also as well. It has short-term, it has some. So it's very important to teach this to our patient. The father of medicine, because if I say the Eastern people say so, people may not understand, but when somebody says from West, people will be happy to listen. So what the father of medicine, the Hippocrates says, let food be thy medicine and let thy medicine be thy food. So this is Hippocrates. In Tamil, we have a person, we have a great saint called Thiruvalluvar. He has Tirukkural, he has there is a set of verses written by Thiruvalluvar called Tirukkural. I'll just read what is in the Wikipedia. Also, the Tirukkural, also known as Kural, is considered one of the most widely translated non-religious works in the world. So far, in 41 languages, it has been translated. There is a chapter called Marundu. Marundu means medicine. There were 10 verses. What he says about verses, this is a well-recognized person worldwide. 41 languages, his verses are translated. There are about 3,000 odd verses. This particular chapter called medicine, he talks, what medicine talks, he talks about food. It's really valuable verses on food. So because if I say this Western, some person from Eastern says, people may not understand, people may not ready to listen to him or believe. So the father of medicine, the Hippocrates, as well as this particular saint who talks about food as medicine. I can't, it's a very wide area, so I can't talk all about I mean, I will touch here and there to show the importance of food when it comes to any diseases, non-communicable and infectious diseases. There are many things. There are two ways you can classify food into two categories. One is macronutrient and micronutrient. When say macronutrients, the carbohydrate, protein, and fat which are needed. But remember, carbohydrate, particularly processed carbohydrate, is a killer, not the fat. Diabetes, cancer, many things. Here also, my personal opinion, the people with COVID should reduce their processed carbohydrate dramatically and increase this part of their diet, vitamins, minerals. And some of you know, some of you don't know what we call phytonutrients. We know there are about 10-15 vitamins, 10-15 minerals. They are important. Vitamin C, vitamin D are important when it comes to COVID. Minerals, zinc. There are some studies shows that zinc is very important when it comes to COVID. There are plenty of phytonutrients. Nobody talks about it, or most of us don't talk about it. There are thousands and thousands of phytonutrients. They are very potent antioxidant in the world. Potent antioxidant. These are the one. Turmeric, and there are so many other things are there. They have done a study. Nearly 3,000 plant-based items have been selected. They did the study and they check their antioxidant property. Which one has highest antioxidant? These are the ones. Like turmeric, ginger, pepper has highest antioxidant property. And these are the one used by the Ayurvedic and Siddha doctors. And so it has a very high antioxidant property. And I will give some example. I don't have any example when it comes to COVID-19. There might be a study done, but as I said, they are not promoted. They don't have enough money to do for big studies. But I'll give some example to show the power of food, particularly phytonutrients. This gentleman is a cardiologist, heart specialist, Dean Ornish, he's still living, and he is the one treated Bill Clinton, the former president. And he did a study, gave plant-based diet and some other exercise to patients who are really terminally ill, MI patient, heart attack patient. they did the angiogram, initial angiogram after plant-based diet, how it improved. This shows the power of the plant-based diet. It improves, it taken the obstruction out. None of the drugs except maybe statin can do this job. Not this much of degree of improvement you can expect from the drug. That is the power of food. Similarly, there's another small study. They gave dry powder of strawberry for a esophageal cancer. These red spots are the cancerous cell. After I think 2-3 months, here they disappear. So this I just showing some example the power to show the power of these plant-based diet with high antioxidant properties. So here also we are dealing with immunity, and so COVID also disease of with something to do with immunity. They have done some other study with some other viruses. For example, garlic extract. When they gave to influenza virus, it inhibit the influenza virus. Not with Coxsackie, herpes simplex also it inhibit. Similarly, SARS virus, there are many extract, component 1, 2, there are many components. It decreases the virus replication. These are few examples I'm telling. Similarly, there are plenty of herbs which are useful in corona, but it's very unfortunate now much of researchers are coming out. Secondly, the fasting. Again, people when they ill, usually you give too much of food and we encourage them to eat and eat and eat. That's a very, I think, to my understanding, this is a harm we are doing to the patient. Automatically, the body says, don't eat. They have loss of appetite. We insist them to eat, which is something bad. And during the time, he's a Nobel Prize winner, one Japanese scientist. He has done studies on fasting, and this is after this only the intermittent fasting become popular. What we call autophagy. When you fast, the body detoxify itself and rejuvenate itself. Don't think when you give too much of food, you rejuvenate. No, it's actually the most major rejuvenation happens when you're fasting. So that's why all the religious encourage fasting. It has a very important impact. I'll give one example again. Breast cancer. So when I think there's a study done, more than 40,000 breast cancer people have been selected, and they fasted for about 13 hours, between 2 meals, 13 hours. And it shows that it reduces the spread of the cancer by more than 70%. Again, that's another power of fasting. Again, all these are something to do with immunity, whether cancer or COVID or many other disease. So this is one thing. Another thing, as I said, about the mind and stress. I will give another important study done by Dr. Imoto. Is no more there. He's a Japanese again. It's there in the YouTube. What he did was, okay, we'll see there are 5 different rooms. One room you keep a glass of water. Each room you keep a glass of water, and one room you go and tell something positively. For example, you say, I love you. I love you. Keep on telling that like a mantra. Another room you go and tell, thank you, thank you, thank you. Another room you go and tell, I will kill you. A negative word or negative emotion. At the end, he crystallized those water in a specialized way, and they looked this into a specialized microscope. It's there in the YouTube. You can go through. These are the kind of crystals he got. When you say love, this is the kind of shape the water molecule got. When you say thank you, this is the kind of a structure it developed. When you say I will kill you, this ugly kind of a structure it develops. So this is before prayer, one water before prayer, this is after prayer. So these are the things which we neglected. So what does this say? Your emotion or thoughts can be transmitted to the water. Number one, our body is nearly more than 70% of the body is water. So what does that mean? When you say something, when you believe something, it has an impact in the body, to your body and to the other body. So that's why very important. When you believe you are healthy, the body reacts, and it changes your chemical structure of your, it stimulates, it secretes different positive chemical like dopamine, serotonin, that kind of thing. It has some positive impact. When you're depressed and you say you are going to die, the body is ready to do whatever you believe. So that is why, placebo effect. It's again evidence-based thing. There were several research done. When the patient believes something, it happens. So for example, there are 100 people with headache. They comes to you, they comes to me. I'm giving a tablet saying you will get, definitely you'll get better from the headache. And you take, and out of the 130 people get better. But what I gave was really a simple, sweet drug, nothing there. It's a pseudo, it's a placebo. But 30 people get, not only that, they have done a study on their brain, and there are chemical changes happens in their brain in a positive way to reduce the headache. Similarly, another 100 people are coming to you, and I'm giving another sweet drug, which is not really a drug. They took, and they have peptic ulcer disease, ulcer problem. I say you take, this will cure you. They took, and 30% of them really got cured. And when you check their body, the chemicals secreted are different here with the peptic ulcer to cure the peptic ulcer disease. But what I gave is same drug. I gave the same drug for the headache as well as ulcer. This is a power of belief. It is a proven, scientifically proven effect, placebo effect. Opposite also can happen. If you think you are going to die, the body will have negative impact on you. So these are very, very important. So when you tell somebody you are great and you will get better, that has a positive impact. Similarly, then in my list, sleep also comes. It's again a bigger area. I just read. This is probably one of the most pioneer in the field of sleep, Professor Matthew Walker. I just read. I'll give one or two example, and I'll read whatever he tells. Sleep is very, very important. Near you, their recommendations say of 7 to 8 hours. But those who are really meditative people can have only 2, 3, 4 hours of sleep. But the recommendation by the present evidence is 7 to 8 hours sleep. What does it do? Sleep is the single most effective thing we can do to reset our brain and body health each day. Mother Nature's best effort yet at contra death. So this is the single most effective thing. He's a professor. He has done an enormous work on sleep. And when you sleep deprivation, when there is a sleep deprivation, I think the WHO has labeled this sleep deprivation as probable carcinogen. So remember, the night shift is probable carcinogen. It damages the DNA. And another study, I think when the sleep is reduced by 1 hour, it increases the heart attack, MI, myocardial infarction, by 25%. These are some examples. Definitely, if the COVID patients sleep beautifully in the deep sleep, it improves their immunity. So these are the things. Lastly, I want to touch one thing, the last part. So I touch about food and fasting and the mind. We talked about, I didn't talk much about exercise. Again, it's very important. Sleep. And lastly, about the medicine, I'm an allopathic person, MBBS, so Western medicine. So, but we forget there is some other aspect of the other aspect. Before that, one of the lacking part in the Western medicine is we talk only about body and mind. That's it. We don't talk about the intelligence the body has. Actually, if you see the Hippocrates oath, the original oath, there are some parts are deleted in the present oath. That is something to do with this intelligence. They call it God, or you can godliness, or consciousness, or Atma. But whatever, whether you believe it or believe God or not, there is some intelligence behind us. We never address this. This is a big lacking part when it comes to Western medicine. You can call it whatever, you can give any name, consciousness, God or godliness, Atma, anything, but there is something. Otherwise, your heart beats daily more than 1 lakh times per day. You breathe 23,000 per day. Imagine 1 lakh per day is not a joke. How many years? And it's with all kind of coordination. And you pump nearly 1,500 liters per day. And there are 100 billion nerves, all coordinated in a very beautiful way. It's not you, it's your intelligence behind this does everything. So we never touches this part. But when it comes to this Ayurveda and Siddha, this is the core of their teaching and their practice. So, but we neglected that part. And so definitely prayer, meditation, breathing technique, yoga has a role, but neglected part in the management of any disease, not only COVID, any disease. This is my last slide. I just want to highlight this one, how we neglected, how the Western people have respected us. So this is actually from Shevak, one Twitter, Virendra Shevak. He says, this actually, I just confirmed it. It's a statue in the Australian College of Surgeon in Melbourne, I think. They say Shushruta as a father of surgery. They recognize him as the father of surgery. He is the father of, basically father of surgery and pioneer of plastic surgery in Ayurveda system. But we never, I don't think we recognize their system as they recognize us. So this Ayurveda and Siddha, basically both are the basic philosophy, same to my knowledge. They have a history of 3,000 to 5,000 old system. And it's very completely different from allopathy. You can't compare. So I don't think allopathy people can examine or investigate their system. It's very difficult unless you understand the philosophy. Similarly, other way around also, the Ayurvedic and Siddha philosophy different. They cannot look in their, I think it's very difficult to relate with Western medicine. So, and one of the important thing is when it comes to COVID, for example, we give treatment against the virus, we treat against the inflammation, but we don't enhance the body's mechanism. But the Ayurveda and Siddha and so many other Eastern traditional medicinal system boost the immunity. It gives more emphasis on that aspect of the aspect. That means it tried to improve the intelligence of the body. There are few countries in China, actually from the beginning, nearly I think 80% of the treatment or their system, they work together. The Ayurvedic, their Chinese medicinal system and the Western allopathic doctors, they work together. Even in Kerala, I think still the same, I believe. When it comes to COVID, again, the both Ayurvedic doctors and the Western doctors, they work together. So this is, I'm sure if we can work together, we can still further reduce the death dramatically. I feel dramatically. So that's all I want to tell. So if you have any question, I can answer.